did my own personal recording of this?
Same
Question I asked last time. Hopefully the answer is the same. It's
Yep.
gonna get recorded anyway.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, did we start?
Yeah.
Welcome, everyone. We'll do a introduction thing here. I just going off the agenda. It says invocation, thought, and pledge of allegiance by invitation. Anybody wants to do it? If not, I will go ahead and do it. Anybody?
I'd like to lead the pledge.
Pledge?
Someone
Okay.
else do the
I'll do the-
invocation, thought, whatever.
I'll just do an invocation. All right. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this wonderful day and that we can get together as citizens to go through our city's budget and have an open mind and look through everything and do so in a manner that is respectful. And I say these things in Jesus Christ, amen.
Amen.
Pledge guy. Pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
All right. Did Ms. Hall get online?
We have 4 people watching, or 3, really.
Okay.
Yeah.
If she gets on, Cindy, she gets on.
Okay, we'll put over here so we can see it.
Is she part of it?
Yeah, she was, they're gonna be doing a lot of stuff from St. George, so I said, zoom it in. She, I mean, being an accountant, I cajoled her into staying. Cajoled, is that the right word? I don't know. I didn't threaten, so whatever. Okay, so how to start? So just going around the room, introductions. I'm Chris Pulver. I'm part of the North Ogden City Council. The mayor, I've been doing this as a citizen, and then this will be year number 2 as a city council person. So, and this, I think this is the 3rd year that we've done a period, so.
Sandy Cochran, I'm just a citizen. I was on the first committee and decided to do it again.
I'm Brian Bartholomew. After snapping at the council last time I came, they said, come get on the committee, and I said, here I am. So.
Wait. Back row.
I'm Dave Espinoza. I'm the assistant city manager and public works director.
I'm Jamie Jones, finance director.
And there's Doug Anderson.
Doug helped get the committee started.
Yeah.
And then, not officially on the committee, although I bet we accept him, but
He doesn't want to be. I think that's the thing. He likes to work from behind the scenes.
How are you? Wonderful.
And
How you doing? You're alive, just in time to introduce yourself.
oh,
in the official meeting,
Are we
we're underway.
Phil Swanson, resident.
I'm John Call, I'm the city manager.
Mike Maybe, resident.
Awesome. So, let's go over we're using what we did last year when it comes to, what we call charter. And I kind of just went over some of the simple things we want to keep in mind, mission, meeting decorum, and then documentation. We do try to take minutes. It doesn't technically get official, but it just helps for the next time to remember what the crap we were doing. And then, obviously if there's any actions for us to go do at home. Yes, there will be homework. So that just reminds us, like the day before, you're like, oh crap, I was supposed to do that or something. It happens to me all the time. So for mission, and everybody can see, yeah, okay, is explore and recommend to city council options for cost savings. I mean, that's kind of how long that took to come up with that. Anyway, provide any feedback, city council. Obviously the big 3 things, and this goes back and forth, but is the city doing something that they shouldn't be doing? Is the city doing something they should be doing? And their idea is to better serve the community and streamline processes. That's, all of those are always big. And I really appreciate 2 new guys showing up to help with that. It really, new perspectives are always good, and people yell and scream and, oh, why aren't you doing it this way? Dude, I didn't know about it, that's the big thing about a lot of city council stuff is that communication from the citizens. We get a handful of people that shoot into the meetings, and even during taxation, if there's truth in taxation meeting, maybe there's another 25. What did we have last time at something like that? I mean, I think 2 years ago was probably more than that,
It
but
was slightly over 100.
but
when we met
2
over
years
there.
ago, over in the,
2 or 3 years ago.
Senior center.
yeah.
It's in the minutes.
So, I mean, that was great, because then you get feedback, but the rest of the year, El Zippo, and that's the problem. I'll be honest, until 2022, I think, when a resident had an issue with something, and I was like, I got involved. That's how kind of steamrolled, and all of a sudden, this is, big chunk of my time is looking out for the city. But to me, this is the most not cost effective. It's the way that you can get involved that in government that affects your day-to-day life the most. People can yell and scream about state stuff or federal stuff, but to be honest, if someone's not picking up your trash or clearing the snow in front of your road, that affects you a little bit more real time. So, like we were just talking about that, strive to explain any findings, plans in a way that makes sense to everybody. I think that's kind of the key thing, and with feedback to the city council to try to. 2 years ago, we had a briefing. Well, sort of the same thing with last year. I think briefed. So Chris or Steph that briefed that. Anyway, kind of went through the things that they were talking about, ideas, and I think last year there was several that I think either we took action on during that process or we've taken action on since then. I know making sure that people that are part of recreation, we're not subsidizing a ginormous amount. It's closer to where the people that are playing are actually paying for, a good chunk of it as opposed to being more subsidized. Stuff like that. Anyway, getting off track. Yes.
I would like to know if there was a report issued at the end of last year's meeting, similar to what we did 2 years ago.
Yes.
I was very absent last year. I'm just curious if I could get a copy of that report, who I would talk to.
I can find it. I remember seeing, if you guys can't remember who was on emails, Phil might have been too. I got a couple of emails towards the end, and I don't know if I got the final version, but I got it close.
Not meaning to put you personally on the spot, but
No,
just since we talked about last
yeah,
year.
that was remembering that, so.
Can you circulate that to the group?
I suppose, yeah. I'm very sarcastic. I apologize right now, but, so that would be last year's finals. Or not finals.
Recommendations.
Final report, whatever you want to call it.
Figure out handwriting lady. Okay, so meeting decorum, it's. We got a little bit heated the first year, I swear. I don't know why, but it's just because you have certain personalities that coexist in the same room, and sometimes people's ideas are not the same as other people's ideas. And so, but I think we got through it, and I think that year was pretty good, to be honest. But treat each one with respect and dignity. That kind of goes without saying. Even if we go off topic, I think sometimes free flow of ideas is very important. So it's like not troubleshooting, brainstorming. No ideas, horrible, and then there's some things that you just like, okay, hold on, let's not recommend that. So, and then I guess the one big thing is there anybody that wants to be the chair? Because technically, I don't know if I can be. It's just because
You can.
you can. Does anybody else
So the
want to
group
be?
should still vote on someone.
Yeah. Any thoughts, questions from other
Sounds like you've been nominated.
nominated?
I would think it should be somebody who has not been here before. Just my suggestion to toss on the table. like one of these two.
This-
Fresh, clean slate. perspective.
Well, honestly, the only thing the chair does is run the meeting. That's it. So I don't care, honestly. That's up to you guys. Technically, the citizens should be in charge, but I don't care either way. Chew on that.
I think you're doing a great job running the meeting.
Thanks. Okay.
You're hired.
Chew on that. If you have any changes of idea, right, just let me know. So specific topics, subjects, we'll kind of keep things on the level. And then obviously we're simple majority when we come up with recommendations. And I think the first year we actually put in all of the ideas that didn't pass muster, which I thought was good. But I think last year we just kind of, everybody was more in sync with, not in sync, but had, I don't think there's any much dissension, but, let's see. And the first year we got really detailed, and that's not a bad thing. I think it got, and as we'll talk about for this, what we want to do this year, I think that first year was like, we've got, I don't know if anybody understands how far down some of these things go, but it was like, well, how many, let me use Doug's thing, how much does it cost to print the agendas? And it's a real cost, right? Because it costs each colored copy that you stick on the desk for public to pick up and walk into the meeting. That's a cost. So that's how far down we want. And so, I don't think we want to get that detailed this time, but doesn't mean we can't. How far does that go? Is that the last one? Meeting agenda, create, okay, and as we said, and as we go, if we have something that, because the budget is fluid, and so it's better to get ideas to the council as soon as we can. So as we go through stuff, and if we come, oh, should probably tell them that now, don't wait to the end, but, anyway. Any thoughts or questions or on that whole dealio? Silence, okay. Everybody's still awake, right? Okay. Tap on the mic. Okay, so the next thing was, were we doing training? Is that what we're doing? Really put people to sleep or?
More of open discussion, but
Okay,
you're the one who asked for it. You went through it this is your third time through it, so.
but we have two new people. It's very, let's just say this. How much do you know about city or government budgeting?
I know a little bit.
A little bit?
Yeah, I recently retired and I worked for a very, very large developer out of Canada
Okay,
and was over a lot of the budgets at shopping centers.
okay.
Big and
Government's a little bit weirder and
It is.
that's why I was kind of like,
And I worked with government agencies a little bit.
so did I. Still do, but
For construction related stuff.
I know minimal. I mean,
Oh,
I've read
okay.
through the North Ogden budget 5 or 10 times over the years, and again, that's partially why I'm here.
okay, that's good. Knowledge is power. Anyway. Yeah, so you got that one briefing that kind of goes through the,
Yeah,
okay.
and it's meant, the way we've always done this in the past is kind of as you have questions, let's talk about it. If I just went through this, we could be done in 5 minutes. I think last year, we did it in about an hour and a half because we just talked and had conversations. And so feel free to jump in.
I got questions in.
Okay,
How often do we meet? Because we talked about doing it the first Wednesday of the month, and I have a conflict on the first Wednesday of every month. Is this like a one-time deal? Is this a monthly deal? When do we get into the meat and potatoes of it? Like, start looking at budgets?
We'll discuss that. I think if, like John was just
Later in
saying,
the agenda, isn't it?
Okay.
what's that?
Later in the agenda, isn't it?
but we can meet
Yeah.
as often as the group would like.
Okay.
And we do have some constraints with the availability of staff.
That's the
But
only one.
but there's and then the other thing that will be really helpful is as what we call the yellow sheets, and we'll get to that a little later too. Those are the ones that are like the line item detail. We'll get those out to the group so that the group can see them, and then we can talk about them at the next meeting.
Okay, so
That's
is
kind
that
of the way.
today or is that next meeting?
That'd be
Okay.
next meeting.
Okay.
We'd start, next meeting, we'd probably start talking about some of the big overall things like revenues and more general expenses.
But I think to discuss what we want to do this year, because there has to be more of a Cause we keep doing the same thing over and over again. We just have just new people doing the same thing that other people did the previous year. We're not gonna get much bang for our buck, so I think I've been ruminating on this a lot, that, what other ways could we help the city? Still go through the budget, still go through the yellow sheets, but I think more on your own time, and if you see anything like, what the crap? We'll talk about it, explain it. I don't think that's gonna change, but I think focusing, having interviews and stuff like that, which is what we've done in the past, I don't know if that's gonna be beneficial.
So I think a good example is that over the past, we've kind of looked item in detail, which we still can do. But the hard thing with that is, like, we can't really impact the cost for chlorine that the water department pays, right? There's a certain type of chlorine gas we buy. It comes from 2 or 3 vendors in the state, and they kind of charge what they charge. And so if the group really wants to make a significant impact on the budget, the thing to talk about is programs. And which programs, it kind of goes back to those 3 questions Chris talked about. What are we doing we shouldn't be doing? What are we not doing we should? And then just those general ideas to streamline or better the process. That's where there could be significant cost savings. And one of those things that's out there quite often is, if we just did away with Parks and Rec, we would save a significant amount of money. And then the council can grapple with what's the trade-off for the reason to do it, or as opposed to eliminating it. And that's something that comes up fairly routinely in these meetings. And so part of the reason we don't bring all the departments heads here is because most of them are very passionate about their particular area. That's why they got into the field. And so we don't bring Becca in here and say, we're going to eliminate recreation programs, because she will tell us all the good reasons why we shouldn't, but there may be valid reasons why we should. And I always pick on recreation because Becca and I haven't had a lot of conversations about it. She knows that I use her as the example, but it's one of those programs that doesn't pay 100% of its cost. If you include the cost for the field maintenance, it definitely doesn't pay 100% of its cost. But most every single family in the city gets a benefit, or can see a benefit from it, either from friends playing, or them playing, or their grandkids playing. I mean, there's just a wide variety of lives that it touches. And so it's one of those things the council wrestles with on, is this the best way to spend our sales tax dollars? Because that's the reality of how it's subsidized, is with sales tax dollars. So.
And another example, we talk about chlorine, of more general or crazy, not crazy, but open stuff. Do we need the pool? I mean, things go up and down, and I don't know about you guys, but my wife tells me a lot. Anyway, and her passion is how much on the pool side, what is subsidized for other people that aren't in the city, that, the North Ogden taxpayers is subsidized. Anyway, long story short, is the overall, that would be a huge, not a huge conversation, but something that would be not big.
It's a good example of a program, right?
Yeah.
Should the city provide a pool or not? And that's a good topic, because if we just looked at the savings, this last year, the city would have saved 90 grand. Jamie knows all the numbers, but about 90 grand of general fund dollars, or in this case, it was RDA dollars. But in the future, it'll end up being general fund dollars, that, we wouldn't have to spend if we didn't have a pool.
How far short is it from supporting itself from admission fee?
That 90.
It's 90.
Yeah. And that was kind of a fluke this year, because we had some weird expenses that popped in.
But we're not depreciating it. And that was the other thing. Anyway,
Yeah.
we'll get into that. But I mean, it's stuff like that, big significant chunks that we can, 90 grand's not a big chunk, but we could do other things. And two new people, but what does the city, what direction should it head? And then that's kind of what we're talking about here. But if there's different things, hey, another thing, why don't we have a recycle can anymore? Why can't we have a green waste can? Things like that people talk about. Everything's on the table. I don't think anything's off the table when we're talking about stuff. So, bring to the table, don't just throw it out there and have, because we'll think you're crazy, but, have some reasons why, and I think we'll talk about it. So,
Yeah.
Anyway, Sorry.
The one other thing I'd add to that whole thing is, understand that if you bring it to the table, there's probably a good chance it's probably not gonna get discussed in full till the next meeting. Cause recycling is a perfect example.
Yeah.
If this group decides, hey, let's have that conversation about recycling again and what that means, you know, what it would cost to the city to start up recycling again. Well, it's probably gonna take us a little bit to give you numbers, give you all that information so that we can be ready. And then we'll probably bring it back to you on the next meeting, to have some of those discussions.
So that's my first question. Do we have a schedule monthly,
So
You
we're
said we
trying to do it every
do-
other week.
every other week?
Yeah. So, cause that's when budget season hits hard. And so, and you'll see, there is a crap ton of data. And either, when we're talking about it, you either have to do a lot of it off meeting, cause if you're sitting there looking at it during the meeting, not gonna get anything done. So, if we can do a lot of things outside of the meeting and come here, it doesn't have to be 2 hours. I mean, that's the kicker, is that, but we're trying to, if we don't need any staff, then we can do it whenever. Well, not whenever, you know what I'm saying, but it can be like you said, if the first Wednesday, well, maybe we can make it Tuesday. I don't know. That's the key thing that we just need to work out. So if there's conflicts, let's talk about them. And so
First Wednesday on every month I'm out.
okay. Can't zoom it. You're just totally out.
Another board meeting at 3 o'clock.
Gotcha. Okay. So we can talk about that at the end and figure out.
So now
We
I don't
could-
have to be there. I'm full willing to do my homework at home and email in a bunch of questions.
Yeah.
And then follow up with that outside the meeting on the second meeting, but I'd like to be involved in some of those conversations as well. So.
Yeah.
So if it's Wednesdays, I'm available
Second Wednesday. or Wednesday,
second, third and fourth Wednesdays.
Yeah.
And
But
second and fourth could work just fine as from a staff perspective,
Okay,
so.
roger that.
Okay. So for the new folks, some of these, we'll just go through some of the terms we use so that you better understand what we're talking about, because department heads, Dave and Jamie and I, we kind of use these terms. First one is utility funds and enterprise funds. Both of those are talking about water, sewer, storm, solid waste.
is that on this agenda right here that you're reading?
No,
Okay.
it's not on there. So,
Do you have the slides
Do you
from
have a
last year?
copy of that paper?
I can get you
Or
one.
do you want me to write this stuff down?
Yeah.
What, do you want me to, I can email the slides we had last year, didn't
Did we have slides last year?
I? I thought so. Am I losing it? Maybe a little bit.
That paper, you mean what he's talking about or this?
Yeah.
Just, yeah, I can give you one when we leave.
Yeah, just so I can get familiar with the terms.
Okay. Or I could maybe even see if I can print it out right now, and Dave, you could go grab them.
While you're printing and grabbing, may I say, did we reach a conclusion as to when our meetings are going to be?
No, because that's at the end with technically an agenda item
We
at
were
the end.
talking about it, I thought,
Yeah,
when's Mike available? You second and fourth Wednesday guy? I'm good whenever. If you don't mind me speaking out of order, why don't we settle it right now?
I
Instead of
agree.
waiting till the end.
I suppose.
Yeah, I'll just grab it. I can print it easier off my computer than here.
Okay, while he's doing that. Yeah, in fact, I won't be available the first Wednesday anyway, so be a promontory. So, there's not a crap ton of stuff going on right now anyways, right? From budgetary point of view. I'm looking. at Ms. Jones.
Not really, starting with the council in end of March.
Okay, but I mean, they're working yellow sheets currently,
They
right?
are, yeah.
And they're due mid-March?
Yeah, for another week.
Another
No,
week?
another week, hopefully by the end of February.
End of February, okay.
So what are you referencing as yellow sheets?
So, basically an Excel spreadsheet that has, office supplies, chlorine, literally.
Budget, right?
List of wants and needs.
Well, no, it's what you had last year. Usually it's kind of what, and it tracks, usually 2 years. I don't know if it goes 3. What you had last year, any ups or downs depending on what you're talking about. And yeah, it's basically what your department budget is, period.
And it
And then
goes
do you,
by
does it
line.
show actual also?
From the previous year. I don't know,
Actuals from
current?
previous, so.
The yellow sheets are not updated to actuals, but we
Yeah.
do provide a budget that shows last year's actual.
Yeah.
It'd be
Yeah.
too time consuming to go back through every line item to update the actuals. So the yellow sheets are what was in the budget, not necessarily what was spent.
So there isn't like a monthly ledger that's done to track it?
Well, there is, of course there is, but it's just not as part of the yellow.
Yeah, this is part of the
Oh,
budget
okay.
process. They're trying to figure out what they need for next year.
Okay.
And the year is July 1st to 30 June, so it's, I don't know, why'd they come up with that? That's just the way it is.
The fiscal year.
Fiscal year.
And then if I may ask, then the record of income and expenses, is different in the budget. Is also available, but is separate from the other sheets, right?
Yes,
Okay, so after all that, 12th of March be a second Wednesday. Thumbs to the screen.
So that-
Okay. We'll make it 12 March. Okay. Next up.
So are we gonna make it the second and the fourth? Is that what we're going to do?
Sure. Won't be available the 4th. But I'll hand
We
it
can
off.
meet without you, right?
That's right. I'll just hand it
Yeah.
off to Sandy and she can,
It's normally a 2 hour meeting, 1 to 2 hours.
yeah. I mean, sometimes we have to like stick a fork in it, so.
That's fine.
I'm not looking at you, Doug. I never said that.
Second.
We get going, I'll tell you. Is
Time flies when you're having fun.
that what you want to call it? Okay. And if I find the briefing, I'll just set it out there.
Then shoot the 26th for the
Yeah,
second meeting.
the next one after that, yeah.
And is this just through the budgeting season or is
Yeah.
it year round?
You want to do it year round? No.
I'm asking. No, I don't.
No, yeah, no, this should end by early May,
Oh, okay. Not
so,
bad then.
no.
Okay,
Back to you.
so again, those two that you see, though, we use utility and enterprise funds almost interchangeably because they reference the same things. The general fund is almost everything else you typically think of: streets, police, parks, rec, planning, building, admin, HR, recorder, council, court, non-departmental, which is kind of a catch-all where like insurance and some of those charges show up, finance, general government buildings, community service officers, which is code enforcement, and then public works. The next fund that's kind of unique is the aquatic center. It's kind of enterprise, but it kind of isn't. But it does have kind of its own fund. We treat it independently, although there has historically been an injection of funds out of the RDA, the redevelopment area, into that fund.
You want to do 2 seconds on RDA because nobody knows what that means.
So currently we have a redevelopment agency that's called the RDA. It used to manage an area called the redevelopment area. So both of them use the same acronym RDA. But that one has expired and now we have a CDA, a community development area, but it's still managed by the redevelopment agency. So, and what happens in that is when the area is established, a base property tax is established. And then as it grows with investment, the increase in that base property tax is split. Typically half goes to the CDA for investment back into the area, and then the other half goes to the independent taxing entities like the school, the county, the mosquito district. And that's an agreement that the city enters into with them to get those funds freed up so that money that goes to the CDA can be used to encourage investment and thus increase the property value for everyone. So then at the end of the 20 years, when the CDA expires, the base property tax value is substantially higher than it was to begin with, or that it would have been had the CDA not injected some money into the area.
It's almost like a TIF.
Yeah, it is kind of like tax increment funding. Those of you don't know that, but that's something that's used on the development side where sometimes the entities will actually give that increment back to the developer to incentivize them to afford the project, maybe build something bigger than they would have otherwise. But it's a way to incentivize growth, and then when those agreements expire, then the government entities still have an increased tax base that in theory cost them less than what they would have because they incentivize private development. So
Do we have an area specifically right now that is?
yeah, we have a community development area. It's kind of crisscrossed across Washington Boulevard. Starts up here at Lee's and heads all the way down to Big O. And it does include the Village of Providence Point because there's some projects on 1700 and water lines in Washington that were part of that. So yeah, we do have that. The RDA that we were talking about just expired. So it was the other kind of half of Washington. They just kind of meshed together like teeth all the way up and down. And that the RDA expired, I guess, 2 years ago now. But that was the money that was used to get acres into lease and to rehab that plaza was RDA funds. So
And that's the main goal of those funds, is to get more tax dollars into the city. So increase property taxes, whatever entity takes over in that spot, or make it such that, you get a better vendor or bigger vendor. So as the development grows in that south of Lee's area there, that's part of that we kind of allocated some to, if a developer needs a little bit more of a shove or, help to get a shove of a bigger tenant, we can give them some money.
yeah, so Smith's marketplace when it came in was incentivized. I can't remember if it was $200,000 or $300,000 to bridge the gap between basically on the sale of the land that eventually ended up being Ace. They needed that much more out of it to get their project to pencil, and that helped get it across the finish line. It also resulted in Ace coming in and replacing the old Smiths as opposed to it just being an empty box. And so there's things like that were part of the RDA that have happened. There's also been some beautification, like the Bicentennial Park was redone with some RDA funds years ago, that sort of thing. So some of the other fees, impact fees, these are paid by new businesses and developers, houses, and they are restricted in that they can only be used for new infrastructure. Oftentimes they go into upgrading existing infrastructure to handle the new size needed. So a water line might be upgraded from an 8-inch to a 12-inch to accommodate growth. And new growth pays for that to happen so that it doesn't fall on the burden of the residents. We also have the Capital Improvement Fund or CIP fund. Those are your big projects, things that are that will last for longer than 10 years and cost more than $10,000. Typically, that's your parks, your buildings, your roads, your streets, your pipes, things like that. And that's the money that kind of is set aside because we have a couple different funds that are out there that hold money in it. One is just the general fund has a balance that's about 25% of our annual spend is kind of our reserve, our rainy day fund. And then anything in excess of what the council wants sitting in there, or 35%, because the state maxes us out at 35% that we can hold, goes into our capital improvement fund, which is then used for projects later on. And right now, both of those funds are fairly healthy. The general fund is about $2.4 million. Yeah. What?
2.8.
2.8. And then capital is just at 2, right?
So what's that percentage? Are we close to that 35%?
So our spend is about 11 million. So we're right around 25%. We could hold more, but the council's kind of, instead of saving money, we move it into capital projects and then plan to spend it on our 5-year capital projects plan, which we'll probably talk about in this meeting and show you here's every fund and here's how we plan to spend those funds for the next 5 years.
Need to move money around the funds?
You can kind of, well, let me say that cautiously. So typically general fund and capital improvement fund for the general fund is all coming out of sales tax dollars. mean, there's some other revenues that come in there like property tax and stuff. But the majority of the money that's sitting in those funds is leftover sales tax dollars. They kind of can go back and forth, but to move it from capital back in the general fund takes a few more mechanical things at the council level. And we typically haven't had to do that because we don't zero out the general fund. In fact, the state requires us to always have 5%. That's the lowest we could ever let it go, or the lowest we could project to have it go. So when we do our budget from the beginning, we project what our fund balance will be at the end. And if it's less than 5%, then we have to cut expenses. They won't let us go below that. And then it's really easy to move money from general fund to everywhere else. To bring it back into the general fund is harder. And specifically talking about those enterprise funds, we can't just move money out of the enterprise fund back into the general fund. They never were commingled. They never came from the same source. There is a way to do it, but our city has historically never done that. I shouldn't say never. I'm not in the memory that any of us remember has the city held a public hearing and transferred money. Some of our cities around us do that. Layton used to do that every year with their power company that they held. They would inject power money back into their general fund. Ogden did it a couple years ago with some of their utility funds, but we haven't done it. And the current plan is not to, partly because those enterprise funds that are existing and left over are planned for capital projects that are needed for pipes and stuff that not necessarily have gone bad, but might go bad in the future. So we replace somewhere between $600 and $1 million worth of pipe every year. We've got not 110, but 55 miles of water pipe in the city.
Almost 100.
Oh, it is, okay.
Are you lining it or replacing it?
Water line we replace, sewer line we line.
Sewer and storm we can line with it's a flexible plastic pipe that gets blown in, inflated, and then a resin injected that causes it to harden, and it turns into a plastic pipe inside the concrete.
And literally the plastic or the concrete could crumble away and the pipe would still be.
I've done a lot of that.
Yeah. And so there's things we do like that, but the reason I said I want to make it really clear is that the money can really only move between capital and general fund without a special act of the city council. And we haven't historically done that where we've taken utility funds and used it for things. And that is one of those things that sometimes people say, stop raising my water rates to pay for parks. That's not what we do.
Yeah.
But it's government accounting is confusing. In fact,
That's it? That's all you're gonna say?
well, it jumps down a little bit, but we are more like General Electric than we are like McDonald's. So McDonald's ignore the property ownership, but they provide burgers and fries to people. That's their job. But General Electric has washers and dryers and light bulbs and jet engines and all sorts of things. And so we're more like that, where we've got kind of this holding company that is the city, then has a whole bunch of little divisions that each have their own specialty. And so that's kind of what we deal with, in that it's not just one kind of streamline of revenue and expenses. It's much more diverse. The city gets taxes or money from a lot of different ways. It's not just taxes, fees, and grants. There's just other things that kind of just come in weird ways. But generally, the ones you hear the most about are property tax. That's the one that probably is the biggest concern of residents, because that's the one that they see most distinctly when they make their property tax bill every year. But in general, our residents pay much more to the city in sales tax every year than they do in property tax. It's just they do it $5 a time at Lee's or wherever. For sales tax, the city gets about 0.5% of everything that's spent in the city. And then we get another 0.5 of that percent comes back. It's called, so at 1% of everything that's spent on sales tax dollars in the state is divided into half. Half goes directly to the city where it was purchased. So if you go to Costco, South Ogden is getting that 50 cents from the from the $100 you spent. The other half goes into the state pool that is then divided based on population. So North Ogden might still get a chunk of that 50 cents back that you spent at Costco, but it's gonna be based on how many residents we have compared to how many are in the state.
Hmm.
And so,
Fractional.
it's fractional, however, one thing that's really helped, that the state did a couple years ago is they started making online retailers pay sales tax. And the point of sale is where it was delivered.
Mhm.
And so we get quite a bit from Amazon from that. Not that they're our highest sales tax provider, but if the state hadn't imposed a sales tax on Amazon and really upped the game, then when COVID hit, most of the municipalities and stuff would have really struggled. And the state, it just in general, when they lost all the resort taxes and all that revenue, it really would have impacted the state. So, ironically, I think we ran the numbers once, and every person in the city just about generates $100 now, $1,000 in sales tax.
Hmm.
So, and it ebbs and flows a little bit, but that's, as you go out and spend, the city gets back either through direct for what is paid in the city or from the population number comes back to us. So, that helps us quite a bit. Our current assets, based on our last financial audit statements, is just over $150 million. That's everything: roads, pipes, buildings, everything that the city has. And then you compare that to our typical general fund revenue. Last year was 11.5, but understand that 11.5 includes some intergovernment rental revenue, like money from the state for roads and things. But really the budget that you end up talking about, that most residents think about, is this 11.5. There's a whole nother budget tied to the enterprise funds that actually is, it's not quite double that, but in that range of money coming in and out of the utility and enterprise funds to pay for pipes, pay for chlorine, pay for employees to work, things like that. So roughly the city's right around $30 million of money. I say roughly because some of that money is in the budget. The way we have to budget gets counted twice. And what I mean is enterprise fund gets revenue coming in that then it pays the city to cover the salary for like Jamie and myself and some of the other staffers that help in all the different departments. And so that shows up in that 11.5 as well, even though the revenue came in through the utility funds too. So it's not exactly 30. There's a little bit of money that gets shuffled around. We call that the administrative services transfer. And that also covers like utility or insurance payment. So the city has one insurance policy for all of our divisions, and the enterprise funds pay that to the general fund, and then the general fund pays the insurance. So
You want a good nighttime read, the audit report that just, the council just finally said, just blessed it. So that's online too. So,
yeah,
The Ambien report.
ambient report. Yeah.
Yeah, make sure you're in bed before you start reading.
The rest of these, we've hit on some of these, but we can go through them because it kind of helps understand that the government is really kind of a service industry. We provide a service that the council decides is important for the residents to get, and as a result of that, the residents get something back. And that's where the fight ensues, right? Because what comes back for the money spent is the reason that everyone's in the room today. But the accounting, we go through expenses and revenues, we track them. The goal is obviously to minimize expenses where possible, and then to control the expenditures within the budget. We have been very good in our departments on controlling the budgeted expenditure, where most departments come in under budget. Last year, not this one, but the year before, one of our departments went over by 2.5%, which you could think is a big number, a small number. In that department, it was about $2,400. So not a major number. That same year, the police came in under about 3%. And for them, that was about $90,000. And so percentage wise, it's if you look at percentage wise, the city's really close. If you look at a dollar wise, we've always been under budget. But understanding that sometimes we do budget amendments in May and April and June that move those numbers around based on revenues or expenditures moving. So, it's part of the process. So it's not like we typically meet the initial number from the beginning of the year, although most of our departments don't get budget amendments. But as things modify and move throughout the year, we do amend the budget to accommodate the changes that happen in the.
And this might be a point to talk about the fact that, and the reason why, and because I always ask why, it's one of my big things, is the fact that sales tax is not some linear line that is predictable. And in fact, that's one of the biggest, I would say, issues, but concerns that council faces is that we see a year to year, sometimes variance that is, last year when we were here, this year we took a significant dive in August, whatever, or what was it last year for November? And we're 2 months behind always. So we don't know what this month will be until 2 months past. So that's the thing that is, I say scary, but definitely makes you pucker a little bit, and you don't want to make too many crazy moves. And so you tend to be more conservative and maybe, I don't say overestimate, but you want to make sure that you're going to stay within a budget that you established that year. And even if you come under, that's great. Like John was just saying, if you have to go up a little bit or down a little bit, that's not too horrible. But heaven forbid that your revenue that you guessed, right? Because you're guessing on sales tax, comes significantly under, and that's why you track it month to month. But being 2 months behind, you're always in a scared cycle, because if there's a significant drop, oh my goodness. Go ahead.
Has that concept been addressed? And this is more of a question for Phil and John. And this issue is constant across all municipalities. Is there another way of addressing the expense needs of the city versus just relying on this fear concept of sales tax? For example, if citizens want the service, charge them for the service, and then, but be, clear about it, rather than if money goes into the general fund, it's a line item of, hey, here's all the services you guys want, and you're gonna pay for it. And then this fear of what's the sales revenue gonna be, because that fluctuates some, that's more falls in the extra category. I mean, does that make sense? I mean,
So there's some rules at the state level that don't let us charge for some services. Police is a good example where they've actually passed a law last year that don't allow you to do what's called a police service fee, where some cities were starting to say, hey, Walmart, our guys are at your spot all the time, so you need to pay, this much a month to help cover it. So the state weighs in a little bit, but a good majority of the services, like the utility services, we do say, hey, this is what it costs and this is what you pay. And then I think Councilman Pulver's point earlier, when he talked about recreation fees, we've started kind of covering that gap on some of those others that are, you might call.
money out of the general fund.
Well, no, we've heard of asking residents to pay more so that the general fund isn't covering the gap as much.
Asking residents to pay more for the fees in the recreation department, okay.
Yeah, so I think we went up by
Upping the fees So that
$15.
they more closely cover the
Right.
actual cost.
And that's my point, is it should be there, and like I said, and I agree with you, the city is a service business essentially. But like I said, and with other cities I've dealt with, they have this same issue, and with online retail affecting brick and mortar retail, the idea of what the sales tax is gonna be, because that can fluctuate. I've said the same thing. Is there another way of addressing the expenses of the city other than relying on retail sales tax? Like, that's why I asked you three, because you've been on the council, you deal with it, you're on the council. And I had one city attorney. Go ahead.
Part of the issue is that so many of the services that are provided by the city are intangible, right? Road plowing in the wintertime.
It's extremely tangible.
It is tangible. What do I charge you?
You charge me more because where I live, I get plowed more.
Sometimes.
You should though. That's the point. That's
Yeah,
exactly what I'm
right.
saying. Brian, you use more plowing because you live up in the cove.
Right.
And you get twice as much snow as I do down at Kings.
Right.
So Brian, you're gonna pay more. That to me is reasonable. And
Right.
Brian,
But this year, we only passed your house twice versus 2 years ago, it was every 15 minutes. You know, how do you, I guess, that's the problem that if it's,
How do you? You keep track of it. You've got GPS on your
we need
snowplow.
60 more people then. I mean, that's, we were talking about different things like that, is how do you keep track of it?
Like, this is my point, is
Yes.
this the direction the city should go to address these issues rather than, again, general fund, all of North Ogden, back to the Walmart thing, Walmart, you got a lot more police service calls, you're gonna pay more. Brian in the Cove, the cops only come up there to look for the skinwalker, so you're not gonna get as much. I mean, I think it's a reasonable conversation is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
And specifically the plowing.
That might be interesting to see what South Mountain did with that, because they charge more for snow removal, fire, for the residents that were up on the hill there.
Where's
And
South
that's
Mountain?
Draper, right?
Draper.
And we have done that with water,
Yeah. That's
right? It used to be that everybody paid the same water rate, and so there was a lot of electrical cost to get water up to you in the cove.
Absolutely.
And so the higher up you are, the higher your tier
Absolutely.
is, right?
Yeah.
I would, the only thought that I have is that the best and the brightest economic minds in the state so far have not come up with a way that things like snow plowing, road paving, you know, how those things are, while they're tangible, how they can be broken down such that we know how much to charge you and your neighbor for that slurry seal that was done on your road, but nobody else's road. Generally speaking, the citizenry is up in arms when you do that, right? Especially if you're in a lower economic neighborhood. And we come to you and say, okay, it's gonna cost us $900,000 to slurry seal your road this year. Nobody on that street has that kind of money. And so the answer isn't, well, then we're not gonna repair your road. That's kind of the shared burden that we take on as residents in the city as a whole, is that some of us, we're all paying for services that everybody benefits from at some point or another.
But there are gonna be some definite, obvious differences that I think could be addressed, specifically plowing.
Sure,
Folks in the Cove should pay more
sure.
than the folks down here, because you run a plow down here 3 times a year and you run a plow down by my house 3 times a storm. That's reasonable.
We'd have
And I
to,
don't think there's one person, one adult in North Ogden City that would argue that. They may not like it.
oh, I think you'd have plenty that would argue it. I think the issue would be, how do we develop that charge? Because right now it just comes out of general fund, right? Money goes in,
We've got some best and brightest in here. We can figure out some zones, or we can figure out
Right.
some guidelines that could address it better than a blanket policy, in my opinion.
I think it's good to take a look at it and see if we can come up with something.
So
Yeah.
can we talk about how, sorry, can we talk about how those funds, what funds snow plowing? BNC road fund,
Right,
how do we get BNC road fund? From the state,
from your emission, from the fuel tax, yeah.
and all that, so how do we not know that that person that lives up on the hill is not already paying more money in fuel tax than the person down here? So I mean, the conversation can go on and on, because maybe that person, I don't know, drives to Salt Lake every day or twice a day.
Well, you drive an electric vehicle and you're not paying any fuel.
To understand what you just said, if I understood this correctly, all of the snow plowing money comes from the state through the gas sales tax. Is that what you just said?
Not all of it, but most of it, yeah. The
Okay,
BNC road fund goes to snow.
well, then we can start there. Part of it's BNC, part of it's city. Again, let's make some adjustments to it. So again, the guys that are using the plows more are paying more. I think that's reasonable. You smirk because it's not a good idea?
No, I was smiling at Phil.
But
But this is the type of conversation that this group was designed for, is to
Right.
go into these weeds and start talking about, is there a new policy? Is there a new program they can put in place? And, you know, some of those, like we talked about with police fees, the state has said, oh, you can't, like, absolutely not allowed for police fees. But you are allowed to charge a street fee, and maybe it could be incorporated into that says, hey, up in the Cove, you might pay 20 cents more or 20% more than someone down by Kings, and this is the reason that we charge you 20% more.
Okay, the state says no. Why can't we push back on the state and say this is why? Because again, I believe there's reasonable people at the state that can see, okay, Brian in the Cove is using more snow plowing than the folks down in the flatlands, so we're gonna charge Brian a little bit more. The people at the state, I think, can understand that as well. Why can we not push back on them?
We absolutely can. It's just the resources. We don't have the time to have someone go lobby the state.
Okay, then they also don't have the resources to come after us if we start doing it. So let's do it anyway.
Well, but they like on road we can, like
Okay.
road we're allowed to. It's just the police thing. The
Okay.
police is the one we're not allowed to.
Okay.
And
Well, then let's start with the plowing.
I wonder if you could reach out to your counterpart with Draper and see what they have done to structure that billing that way, because I know they do it for snow and they do it for fire.
okay,
I'm pretty sure they do it with, but we can definitely look into it.
Yeah.
Because I think
So in,
there was like a certain fee for a group and equipment they got more equipment, and so that's like their equipment turned over faster, which is, that's how we can look more into it, because I know I've seen that same thing you were saying. so
Yeah.
We can look into it.
so we'd have to do that entirely. In fact, what I'm saying is that there would be a salt equipment, somehow we'd have to figure out.
we look at man hours and we look at all of it, yeah.
And then you pick zones, that's what you're.
I-
the concept.
Exactly. And again, I understand there's gonna be some gray area of zone, but again, the folks up on the hill using more plowing, myself included, I have no problem if I saw my water bill an extra $1.50 for plowing, or whatever it ends up being, because then I can say, yeah, you're using more plowing and the guys down low are not.
And,
But what other, got that, is there anything else in that vein? Or if there is, just ruminate.
Cool. Get that thing breaking even. My understanding is 10 years ago, it was losing the same 90 grand, but that did not include the cost of the bond payment. So my understanding was it was losing 400 grand on the bond payment, plus it was losing 90 grand in operations cost. In 10 years, we can't get that 90 grand closer to zero. Why is Harrisville not paying $45 a person to come to our pool? Have we tried that? Have we made the difference in price so obvious that the North Ogden folks that are paying for the pool get a massive discount, and the folks that aren't paying for the pool don't get a massive discount? Let's get that down to 10 grand difference, not 90 grand. And the other question is the pool paid off? That $500,000 loss on the bond side, is that taken care of?
Paid that off
That's paid
5
off.
years ago, 6 years
What
ago.
was it?
The 135, wasn't it, John? Payment, that's what we were transferred out, what was it, Jamie?
yeah, but yeah, the bond was paid off
Okay,
years
so the
ago,
pool's
yeah.
paid for, we're still losing 90 grand a year on that. We're not smart enough to figure that one out. Like, let's try something drastic.
Yeah, well, they did this past year. I think we're still crunching numbers to see how that, you know,
We-
you know.
We increased our gate fee by about 30%,
On who?
everybody.
Okay, why are we charging the citizens that are losing money on it the same as the other folks? And or why are we North Ogden citizens, and myself who never goes to that pool because it grosses me out? Why am I in part of a group that's losing that kind of money? We can figure this one out.
So it was just I mean, it goes back to the council's discussion about it, but they increased it on everyone because the idea is that the users should pay for it, not the citizens.
I think,
And so
but Brian's point is the ticket sale for a North Ogden person different than a non-North?
it is, but that's what I'm saying is that the point is that the users of it, resident or not, are paying the cost of the facility.
And we're still losing money, you just said. We're still
Correct.
losing money.
Yeah, and
Raise it again.
and that's what we're talking about. Last
Right.
year, the recommendation from finance to make it pencil was $11, 10.25, and we went to 8. And that was just the council trying to not move it $4 in 1 year. And so that's on the program, but this is another good thing to talk about.
Yeah.
So that's
Again.
part of the conversation, because if we raise it $15, to your point, then you're gonna lose half the people coming out to it, and then you're gonna lose 90 grand anyway.
You gotta find that sweet spot.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if the pool is so much of a losing venture, because no one wants to pay what it costs to use, has the discussion been had? Shut it down.
Yeah, and I think that's part of this discussion.
In my household, yes.
And Brian, just so you know,
Did
here's
you
the
win?
problem, is that lot.
Do you win or lose when you're talking to anyone?
Historically come out of
Me neither.
holiday money. That's gone now, so now the citizens, if that is not to a break-even point, now it starts coming out of the general fund, which is taxpayer money.
Here's another thought on the pool. have these numbers been posted at the gate at the North Ogden Pool? So when my sweet neighbors with their kids show up and say, why is it $15 to go here? Can we have it posted? Hey, North Ogden city residents lose $100,000 on this pool every year, and we're tired of losing $100,000 on it. Again, I think we are reasonable people that can understand this is what it costs to go to a pool. If you don't want to pay $15 to go to a pool, then build your own pool or don't go. Has that discussion been had? Posting these numbers. So like I said, people are gonna complain.
Part of the discussion is that you have to have from a more philosophical standpoint is what you're talking about, because the pool's part of the Parks and Rec program. What part of, what any park in the city pays for itself? What do we spend on maintaining our grass parks in an annual, a whole lot more than $90,000? And nobody pays anything to use those things. They're all losing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Our
Like-
park system
Playground
is,
equipment.
probably close to $500,000 a year that we lose in parks. So do we sell off the parks and build houses because we're gonna start charging an entry fee? Do we fence off the parks and say you can't come in the park unless you pay? And we justify that by posting a poster that says it costs us $500,000 a year to cut, to mow, to fix, to spray the weeds, to fix the Bowery. We just spent last year $250,000 on playground sets for 2 parks. They're $125,000 each. So do we just tear all those down, fence off the parks and say you now have a $50 per person per day entry fee to come in and use the park?
No, but I think you could put a line item in the bill that says, hey, this is the money that's going to pay for the parks.
That's the philosophical discussion that has to be had though, because if we're going to look at the pool, which is really part of our park system, if we're going to look at it and say it has to pay for itself, then philosophically, we have to say all parks have to pay for themselves. And if we're willing to say, well, we're gonna get rid of the pool because it costs us $90,000 a year, it pays, what is it, 600-ish thousand, somewhere around there, and the city as a whole comes up with 90,000, well, we're losing $500,000 a year on the parks. So if we really want to go after big money, we leave the pool alone, we get rid of all the parks, because that'll save us $500,000 a year. We can fund the 90,000 for the pool, which more people use than any other facility in the city. And we're
Where do you
still,
get those
up
numbers?
$410,000.
Where do you get those numbers? The more people use the pool than any other park.
Have you been to a pool?
But it's only
Yeah.
open 3
I
months.
I understand.
It-
I just asked you where you got those numbers.
2,200 people a day constantly from open to close. There's not a park in the city that even comes close in a given week or a given month of having, I've got Mountain View Park right behind me, and in soccer season, you'll have maybe 100 people there for 1 or 2 games once or twice a week. There are more people in a single day.
You're comparing an annual park usage to how many months is the pool open? 3, 4?
Yeah, and we're talking with maximum occupancy is 2,200-ish? Somewhere around there,
It's 900.
900, and
It
it,
rotates.
but it's constant. There's a line of people all day long, so in the course of the day, we'll have between 1,800 and 2,200 people show up 6 days a week for 4 months. You don't get 2,200 people showing up in a month at any of our parks, other than like on cherry days.
But again, on an annual basis, what are the numbers?
That's what I'm saying. If in a given month, like the park behind me, you have a couple hundred people that show up a month times 12, right? You're looking
I
at,
don't know.
you're looking at
throwing
20
numbers out. I'm asking you. what you're getting.
2,400-ish people a year that use the park. And you get that many every day at the
You think
pool.
Mountain View Park gets 2,400 people there a year?
Yeah. I live there. I watch it. It's empty 99% of the time. I have a camera that looks out onto the park to catch the people using their
Let's track it then.
motorized vehicles.
But this is a good type of discussion, right? And digging into these numbers at a future meeting, because again, if we're talking programs, we're gonna make a bigger impact, right? Like Brian is saying, like, if we look at how can we make the pool pay for itself, and how can we, through rentals or other ways, help the parks help cover that gap? Because the reality is that sales tax dollars are a little wonky. The worst scenario we had was the 2008 to 2011. We lost 20% of our sales tax, which in this day and age would be pretty close to $1 million. I mean, I'm giving us a little cushion, but might be closer to 800, but $800,000 is really hard to make up in other ways. And so, finding ways to build those revenues before the downfall could be very helpful, and not necessarily on the back of property tax, but through user fees. Is a good discussion for this group to have, and we can delve into that.
And the point I was trying to make is that it's not just a matter of looking at something that costs money and saying, do we or don't we eliminate it? Because we're dealing with 22,000 people, we have to look at the philosophical piece. So we have to be able to answer the question. If we say, okay, the pool's gotta go, and we've had that discussion for years. Pool's gotta go, have to be prepared to have the full discussion. Okay, what other parks and rec things ought to go as well? And then do we eliminate those? And if we do, and that's the decision, and council's the one that ends up making that decision. Then what do you do with the parks? What do you do with the pool? What is there a better use for it, or does it just sit empty?
100% agree with that.
Yeah.
And Phil,
Wait,
It's a great
Ian, a comment.
conversation.
Do we have any known risk on the sales tax?
Water tank.
Risks?
Yeah,
Oh,
well,
yeah.
we know it ebbs and flows, but do
Yeah.
we have any risks that we're aware of that could significantly impact it? Because, I mean, Smith's leaves.
If
Yeah.
Smith's caught on fire and was out of commission, or Lee's, or that's a significant impact to the city.
Do we think that Amazon, once they make that plant fully functional down the road, is that gonna start delivering food and impact Smith's?
Maybe.
Just that,
We still get the sales tax.
but you get a fractional sales
Yeah.
tax, right?
It's the same. It's the 1% local gets split 50-50.
Oh, okay.
And it's whatever's delivered, you get that.
Oh, okay.
And some of the
Because it's
risk
point of sale.
isn't so much, is it gonna go away? Because there's always that risk, right? That we have an economic downturn and sales tax takes a nosedive. I was talking with Mayor the other day, credit card debt just hit in the United States $1.2 trillion.
Yeah.
Right? It's up a massive amount. Other debt is up 30%. The sales tax numbers that we have now are based on debt spending. And people are running out of credit cards and debt to spend on. So at some point, we keep thinking that there's gonna be a softening in those sales tax. The other piece is where I see the bigger risk, costs of things provided by the city and covered by sales tax increase in cost every year. And sales tax growth is not keeping up with that increase. To me, that's the bigger risk. We've got to get more economic development in, we've got to get more business in, but now we've got pretty strong competition from Pleasant View. And we've got the really big 80+ acre project that just in Far West above the Maverick out there by I don't know if you saw that, go to the Far West City website and.
East of that Amazon?
No,
No,
this is
north
the
of-
Maverick out
north
here
of
on
that.
2700.
Oh.
Right north next to freeway.
That 85 acres up there, there's a huge it's basically a Farmington station
Oh,
that they're starting on. And
so it's got a huge.
that's gonna be a sales tax draw. It'll make it more difficult for us to get really good retail and sales tax providers here in our community, because now we've got stronger competition. So to me, that's the bigger risk. Where are we gonna grow our sales tax? Because we can't
So
keep
limited.
growing
Yeah.
property tax.
Bill, I think I mentioned to you, here's the other thing we're faced with. Part of that allocation of sales tax is based upon your percentage of the population in the state.
Right.
And cities like Vineyard, these fast-growing cities, our percentage of the population is dropping because we're not growing as fast. So our allocation coming from the state pool also has the potential to be decreasing. But it's no secret, John, about our working with Pleasant View, is it, on our project? I mean, it's out.
Yeah.
As you know, one of the things we're working on right now is trying to avoid duplication. If you look at our police departments, the cultures are so much alike and we're helping each other like crazy anyway. So one of the things we're working on, we're going to be having a joint, work session with them. But the two chiefs right now are working on what they can do to combine the police department. We don't need two chiefs. We don't need 8 sergeants. We don't need all this stuff. So we're trying to, and it seems like their council, is really receptive. And so far, our council is receptive. But that could save long-term and short-term some substantial money. Now, unfortunately, you've got a particular council member over there who thinks we're in competition instead of coordination. But there's a lot of things, if you look at it, we could do on interlocal agreements together between these 3 cities if we didn't have such egos. I mean, we don't need,
Yeah.
there's so much duplication in such a small area. But that's one of the things, we're working on.
Well, fire is already structured that way, it's not.
Correct.
It's a
Separate district.
separate district. You can't do, because police is so funded by property tax.
Yeah.
You couldn't do a separate district, so we're looking at an interlocal agreement. That ought to be, I think, part of the discussion with this group too, is what could we approach the other cities on doing together? Because they can't say no if we don't ask, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or they may happen to say yes.
Like more help with the senior center.
Well, Pleasant View did kick in finally
15?
12 grand 2 years
Yeah.
ago, but we've got Harrisville.
Harrisville.
And these other cities who think they ought to be able to use that is free. Which, John, by the way, we need to get Jill to get us that information. She's on which cities are attending over there so that we can go.
Oh, I thought she'd okay.
I didn't see it. Maybe.
Well, I don't think she sent it to me. I thought but I assumed because we stopped talking about it, so. Okay, but anyway, so there's there's a lot going on. You can see the different types of funds the city has. These are all unique funds. Some of them are restricted, like a special revenue fund. It says this is the only thing you can spend it on. Impact fees is a good example, right? We talked about. It is collected for a specific purpose. It can only be spent on that purpose. Other stuff like general fund has a lot more wiggle room, and that's where the council, again, in the budget, that's where they spend 90% of their time is talking about general fund. Because that's the stuff that is the policy decisions about how do we spend this sales tax. I keep saying sales tax because the council passed a resolution that all property tax goes to police. So typically we're not talking about property tax when we're talking about that discretionary money, because it's already been assigned to the police. And it covers about a little over half of what they cost a year. Motor pool funds is another unique one. They're technically part of the general fund, but we try to show the money coming in and out of them because the equipment that's owned by the motor pool fund is used by the enterprise funds. And so they pay in to help cover the cost of the maintenance for that. Police also have a police motor pool fund that helps pay for the mechanics and the works the mechanics do on the cars. But those are some of those other kind of funds. In this next list of expenses, the 2 biggest expenses the city has, as just a general rule, are salary and benefits. The general fund, if you add those 2 together, I'm going to get my percentage wrong, but it's more than 50% of the general fund pretty much is going to salary and benefits. Some of those costs are things that there are ways to help with benefits, but some of those benefit costs, we pay what we have to pay because the state has assigned, if a person works more than 30 hours a week for the city, then we have to pay for the benefit. The health insurance is like that with some of the federal rules. Once they hit a certain number of hours, we have to provide health insurance. Lately, the city has been trying to help shift the burden of health insurance towards the employees, in particular by focusing more on HSA programs, and those who don't want to use an HSA pay a higher percentage of the cost of their insurance. But in general, government benefits are typically better than private sector benefits. And so that's one of those things that comes in. There's governmental expenses. things like us paying the sewer district for them to take our sewer. Pine View, like we pay Pine View a certain amount of money to give us water for our parks, things like that. So there's some of that money going in. The county, we pay them for CSI services, things like that. Motor pool, department supplies, professional expenses, and then computer programs. One of the things that came up in the discussion was trying to find numbers about users and where users are coming to like the pool and stuff. One of the requests this year is from our planning and economic development director to buy a software that provides some of that information. The trouble with it, or not the trouble with it, the concern that's raised around it is it gets its information by tracking cell phone data. The people who provide the information are using cell towers to scrub the data. They don't provide the last mile or last half mile of information. So as soon as someone leaves this intersection, if they live within a half mile of the intersection, it doesn't say where they go, but it will say, hey, if you go to Chick-fil-A on 12th Street, and you stop at Smith's, then it'll start predicting your next stop. So like if you hit those things, then it's going to predict where they think you're going. And the reason I use those two is that there's a strong correlation between the people who visit Smith's and Chick-fil-A on 12th Street.
What?
Yep.
Seriously?
Yeah. So they did some kind of little analysis for us, and it will also track how many people go to parks because it just tracks cell phone data. But again, it doesn't, so it tracks unique users, but to buy that software is expensive. So that's one of the things that he was planning on asking the council for. I think it was $4,000 a year. And I say expensive because he doesn't have another single line item that's $4,000 except for maybe the training for the two of them. But that's one of those tools that this group might be asked to weigh in on a recommendation. Is it worth trying it for a year to see if we get the numbers to help us better understand? Because one thing, again, going back to the aquatic center, is I don't know that we know how many of the people who go to the aquatic center that also patronize the other, like Lee's, or I think Little Caesars, we know has an uptick because so many Little Caesars boxes end up there. But we don't know how many people in the summer change their shopping pattern because they come to the pool, and how much that may increase our sales tax dollars. It's hard to pull all those things together, but that's one of the things that we're maybe talking about this year is getting a program like that. With that being said, the state is also passing a rule that may prohibit us from having a program like that tracks or having access to a program that tracks user like cell data. So it may be a foregone conclusion depending on what the state does with that bill. And then you can see the last one is just the types of revenues. Taxes generates the most amount of money, with the majority of that coming through sales tax, but we also get franchise taxes, property taxes, and then there's other little taxes in there. The one that the city has typically the most say in is 1, property tax, and then 2, the fees. Those are the things the city council has the most control over. How much do we charge people to use the various things that we have? We do have some say in fines, but historically fines are not seen as a good way of increasing revenue. You talk to Manaway and some of those other places where their perception is that, fines are driven to increase city revenue. I can tell you in our city that the fines collected or generated by our officers just about cover the cost of the court. So 85% of the money that comes in from the fines goes to the state to pay for the state court system. The 15% we get helps cover the cost to operate our own justice court. So it's not, tickets are not something that we rely on for revenue, other than it helps to offset the expense of writing tickets. So it almost kind of breaks neutral or breaks even if you ignore the fact that it's not covering the cost for the officers to drive around.
Well, I've been doing my part. So I don't know about the rest of you.
Thank you.
My insurance apparently reflects that.
Yeah. And so that's kind of the spiel of the training, the kind of, there's a whole lot of rabbit holes this group can go down. Just the initial discussion today seems really heavily focused on these programs, which is really healthy because every year when we go into the yellow sheets, we get so focused on little items. I know last year we had a big discussion about cell phones. I have two cell phones, one for the city that the city pays $15 a month for, plus the cost of the phone, and then my personal one. And so there might be $15 we can save if we forced everyone to use their own phone, but I
I'll
think
just get
there's.
another ticket to offset
Yeah,
that.
right.
Have you
But-
looked at doing a
Maybe
stipend? to the
So we
employees?
have some employees who do a stipend. We kind of leave it as a preference. For me, I get so much information that comes through on the city that I think it should be housed here and a unique number. So if I die in a fire auto crash, the next person can just have all the information.
And it's not
You-
commingled.
You
That's
can't
the-
put two numbers to one phone though.
I do, and this phone will do that, but it's not as flawless as I wish it was. And it doesn't, the data still end up being crossed. It's the texting isn't, but no, you're right. So there are a lot of good ideas. Talking about these programs is huge because if we can fix the program discussion, one of the things Chris and I talked about before everyone came in is, we talk about a special revenue fund. I mean, there's the opportunity, not saying we should, but to maybe take all of our property tax and call it the North Ogden Police Special Revenue Fund. And so that would help message to the residents that all this money is going to the police. It's not going to parks. And in fact, it would then legally bind it even stronger than the council currently has it. So it has to go to police. And then you could talk about making sure that the police budget in comparison to property tax, you could keep those two in relation to each other in a way that would help if you need to increase property tax, or to a point to where, for a good example, that you can cover all of the salaries for police out of property tax, and then everything else can be coming out of that fluctuating sales tax dollars, because, the building is not gonna get repossessed if we don't make our payment one year, because sales tax bottoms out. At least I don't think they'd repossess it, but, and we could maybe stretch cars a year, but it's really hard to not pay officers. And officers, as we all know, are way more expensive now than they were 4 years ago. The anecdote I always use is when I started here in 2012, we were paying officers $14.92 to start. And they moved quickly, meaning they got another $1 in their first year.
If you don't pay them, they're gone.
Yeah, now a starting officer is $27.83 is the new, so not quite double, but it's moved. And it should, right? It's hard as taxpayers to understand, to pay that expense, but at the same time, to have a safe community, we need officers who want to be here. And right now, the officers joke it's free agency. It's just like the transfer portal in college football and college sports. If you want another job, you can get another job. There's 10 jobs out there for every officer that we have. And so we just have to keep up with it. And sometimes it's not money, it's not the benefits. Sometimes it's the culture. Having a new building adds some value that we're paying for through the building, but we're not necessarily having to pay into salary, because we have officers that would rather work in a nice facility, as compared to the 60-year-old building we had before. But money and benefits and buildings don't solve every problem though. So there's always a lot to fix. That's my spiel.
Okay, I had one more spiel, but, and you can pass this around if you want, but, as a kind of a weird thing I started looking at was, and you guys can peruse that, the cities at the bottom, because what I did is I was trying to look at, because every once in a while I'd go onto a different city's budget and say, well, how the heck did they, like North Salt Lake has a golf course, and I don't know if golf people, anyway, it's a nice one. And they actually make money, but it's not in debt, and there's little weird things like that. And some people, some cities have to pay for cemeteries, and I'm like, well, is that because the cemetery by the, just up here is
It's its own district. It's a quasi governmental district.
true, and but is there a plan for another cemetery? Little weird things pop in my brain all the time anyway, but So the four cities at the bottom there, it's going around that have a similar city budget and a similar population size. And also technically square miles, was Highland, North Salt Lake, Clinton, and West Haven. So if there's any time that you guys want to compare, and ladies, sorry, I say guys in general, that you want to go compare or look at, because I wondered, how, obviously you have, if their fire department or, is also included in that, you gotta take it out, there's some weird stuff, but in general, sometimes looking at a different city's budget is always an interesting thing to do. Like Brigham Cities is a wild time because, it's a county seat too, so.
Yeah, same,
But they also have a
similar
pool.
population, but
You
they're,
wanna look at the pool there, you wanna go into a deep black hole. They have a deep black hole with their pool, so, it's all what you wanna pay for. And, my son lives up there now and he's like, oh, it's great, they have, I don't know, he said 50, I don't know if he's exaggerating, pickleball courts up there. It's an enormous size, and so again, you're paying for service, but I guess the question is, and that's the philosophical thing Phil was talking about, and I agree, 1000% is what do we want to, and that's something, new guys, that's basically what we struggle with on a day-to-day basis is what do people want? And what should we pay for and what should we not pay for? So.
Be interesting to understand their sales tax revenue as
Exactly.
compared to here, because I think ours is very limited.
Well,
You're right.
Yeah.
You did an analysis on that. Per capita sales tax collected in North Ogden is like, what was it, John, $270 something?
yeah, something like that.
You look at cities like Draper or Sandy, they're almost 500, almost double. And you know what's interesting? West Haven doesn't even have property tax.
Mhm.
I mean, it's because they got all this.
Well, they do that development down behind Maverick, they're gonna eat our lunch.
Far west.
But
Or
I,
far west, yeah.
that goes back to what I said before. I think we need to accept that and the citizens need to understand that we've got to look at a different way of generating
Yeah.
revenue. We cannot rely on the sales tax revenue because it's gonna change. And if Far West's gonna take it all, that's the way it goes. But if we have a tax system there that lays out what we're paying for, that shows it and the citizens know it, and then they can say, look, we have to pay for all these services because we don't have enough retail sales tax, then the citizens can make a decision how they feel about that. But I think we've got to go a direction where it's gonna be taxed through other means other than retail sales tax. And Phil, I'd love to have that philosophical conversation with you.
I think we need to have it
Oh,
as a
we'll
group,
have it,
yeah.
don't worry about that.
We-
But I think one of the key things in what the council's working on and everybody's working on is getting that below, we're in between the detention pond, all the way to America First, that whole area. And that's the key thing that's gonna save our bacon, but also, the future is the rest of Washington. People are like, oh, that's, but there's a whole bunch of holes that are farms and other things that, right now, we're not technically, says the general plan, but is there active planning? And that's, a whole thing that council's working on. But I think that what your point is that if you can't raise both property tax, because commercial's 100%, not 55, and sales tax at the same time, it's gonna go through the roof as we expand out to 40+ thousand, when we fully build out. We're gonna be, almost priced out of the market when it comes to taxes, because we're not gonna have enough commercial. Right.
Yeah. But
So.
again, if you understand that coming in,
Right,
then you can make a decision.
right, and
It's
that's,
when you see a beautiful city and you think it's gonna be taxed similar to other cities, and it's not. And in this case, there is very limited retail. That's the reality of it. And then we can look at, okay, how many parks and pools and crap do we wanna pay for? Here's the list we currently have.
yeah, and the thing that they're trying to do, and I think John touched on it briefly, is when there's any new hole dug in the ground for a house, you're paying 20 to 30 grand up front. Mayor knows, to impact fees and all this other stuff and Park One is a new one for this coming year, and
Public safety,
Yeah.
one as well.
so it's going. But at a certain point, all those stop because you stop building houses. But at the same time, the more, say dense, it's not the, is that the right word? You know, you're gonna get more of it, and, you know, developers are gonna get it's gonna cost more. And I think that's one of the other problems is that same thing with the pool, how far do you go before they go orthogonal? I'm gonna go over someplace else. You know, Powder Mountain, I don't know. Anyway, that's another story, but, have you ever been there lately? The ginormous houses up on the, anyway. Sorry, I got enough on it. Yeah, I squirrel a
Do you
lot.
want us to look up the city budget online and read through that before the next meeting, or what's our homework?
North, okay, that's a good segue. I think, the two big things to have read through and have questions on are, okay, the audit report takes some time. In fact, I still go peruse it every once in a while. My son is finally he'll be finished this, but he's accounting and he works at, one of the firms down in Ogden there, but, even he can't explain some of this because yes, he can. It's a different language for most people. It's an accounting language. Jamie knows what I'm talking about. It's different it's like if, I don't know about engineering, but mechanical and electrical, two different languages. So it takes some time to look through it. Budgeting, same thing. I mean, you can go through it. It gets pretty detailed. If you haven't looked at the budget yet for this past year, it gets down in some of the minor details. So yeah, definitely look through both of
Do
those.
you want us to look at it digitally? Can we get a paper copy to take notes on?
Yeah, I would look digitally because it
You can
depends on
bring
what
it
you
up
want.
as a PDF off the city's webpage
all
and then
the-
just print it off.
The audit and the budget are on the city. I can't remember, it seems
Yeah.
like you emailed the budget, because I read through it once already, and I was
Yeah,
like,
probably.
I had a lot of questions.
But I'll try to dump a whole bunch of stuff in an email, so you don't have to go sifting. The new website I think is better. In fact, I think the audit's up there now, right? The new audit?
How many pages is the audit?
How many pages?
Ish.
50?
Like the budget was like 46, I wanna say.
Is it numbered? Maybe.
Yeah, it's in that
It's that
range.
thick,
Double-sided.
double-sided that thick.
But we can, Chris, if you can send them out, or if someone really needs a printout, we can print one out for this group, anyone who needs.
I'd like a printout, so I can print it myself, or if I can get one, just again, I take notes and have to read it 5 times to make sure it registers sometimes.
Just 5 times? Okay. That's better than me.
But you're saying the budget is publicly available on the
Yes,
internet?
has to be. Yeah.
So you just give us the address.
And this is the 25-26 budget, correct?
24.
24,
No,
25.
24, 25.
We're talking about the 25-26 in this group.
Yep.
That's what
So
we're
it's
doing right now.
it's the fiscal year that ends.
Right. So what's available online? The current 24, 25?
24, 25, yeah.
Yep.
But this
But
group,
the
we're
audit.
talking about 25-26?
Correct.
It's coming.
You want me to read both of those?
It's not, the other one's not out there yet. We haven't built it
The
yet,
new
but
one's not out, okay.
But it'll be, the nice thing about the way the city does its budget is that 7-digit code at the front doesn't change. The amounts might change, but it's for the same things. So like when it says computer supplies, it's computer supplies the next year. And just so everyone knows that the initial ask to the department heads this year is to not ask for an increase on anything unless they can spell out in blood why they need it, basically. So.
Blood? Wow.
Blood.
So that's the request of the department heads. Doesn't mean there's not a few requests, but there's just some of the things we're just trying to be conservative on. You just bring in stuff that's happening on the East Coast with the federal government that affects the workers here in Utah and Weaver County. We may see a dip in sales tax. So we're just trying to be extra cautious and not ask for things that aren't required, basically.
Just one other thing is, just a reminder, as we review the budget, that there's 2 sides to the budget, right? There's the expense side and there's the revenue side. It's typically, when I've met with people who have gone through the budget, they only look at the expense side. And they're looking at it and saying, well, here's a line here where we increased this by 55,000 and that was a 100% increase. Didn't spend anything there the year before, but you go back and look at the revenue side and you'll find, well, we broke that out. It was spent before, but we just added more detail. So we took a single accounting line item, broke it out into two. So now we've got a new line that shows an expense where a line didn't exist before. Or there's additional revenues that came in from a grant or something along those lines,
Or donation.
where it's a wash. It looks on the expense side like we spent an extra 50, 100, whatever it is, 10 cents. But you look at the revenue side, so you got to balance both of those sides out and make sure and just check.
But definitely ask questions. If you see something weird.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes you can't see the other one because it's buried in something else, like, or a grant or donation line. Another's, was the police, vests.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those get donated, or the money for them gets donated. So, but you see the uptick and you're like, what? But then there's the counter on the other side. But anyway,
A lot of fun reading.
questions, comments,
Thanks, Andy.
this is an open,
I got one more question
yes,
for everybody.
keep it coming.
When I campaigned for Berube years ago,
Oh, boy,
I told him to lower my water bill. And it didn't happen,
it's going up, by the
which is
way.
why I'm here. What's everybody else's motivation? You guys work for the city, so you're getting paid. You're getting paid. What's your motivation for being here?
I love the city. I want it to be the best it can possibly be.
What's your personal
That's
motivation? Like, I want my water bill to go down.
That's
I'm being
my-
open about that.
That's my personal motivation.
What is your definition of love for the city? I'm just curious.
It's a great place. I want it to be a place that people want to live. I want it to be affordable. I want it to be nice. I want parks. I want everything that makes a city great. And I understand that changes from person to person.
That's a very variable.
Yeah.
Concept.
Yep.
So you're kind of contradicting yourself. You want it to be great, you want it to be cheap, but to be great, it's gotta be
I
expensive.
didn't say cheap. I didn't say cheap.
You said affordable.
Affordable. Well, and again, affordable,
It depends.
when we talk about, it's one of those philosophical things, and I'm happy to go to lunch with you now that I'm
I
not
don't
on
believe you. You
council.
lied to me last time.
Well, that's because I was
Go
on
to lunch.
council and I didn't want to get beat up with questions that you brought up just to beat me up.
Well, let's go to lunch then.
Then
Again.
I will call you. I've got your
I
number.
hope you do.
I will.
Bill, clearly you and I have a trust issue.
No,
You
we
lied
don't-
to me multiple times.
No, we
about
don't
the
have
exact
we don't
issue.
have a trust issue.
Okay, moving on. See.
Thank you. Well, again, what's their, I don't remember your name. What's your motivation for being here? I'm just curious.
So when I was working, I did a lot of this type of stuff. So I want to take a look at everything and see if I can offer anything. See if I can see some things that maybe we could do different, save some money, do better. I don't know, just dig into it and see what I can do to help.
I can tell you why
Yeah.
I'm here, because I can't complain about the bill I get at home if I don't know why it is what it is. That's why I go to city council meetings. I go very often so that I know what the city's doing, why they're spending money, why, I keep seeing all these vehicles here or other things.
She's part of the solid four. The other three are online. So that's I won't say crazy, but you have a solid team. And once I started, I don't know if I'm masochistic or what the right term is. I love this stuff and I don't know why. To answer your question personally, I got involved because like I said earlier, it's the easiest way to affect your day-to-day life. Knowing what's going on, that's, maybe that's type A, I don't know, but also affecting change in the right direction. And big government agency, it's like knocking over a Coke machine. You have to rock it back and forth a few times. But lots of times, once you get it going, it goes and you're like, hey, I just did something, and I think that's in the background. I think that's part of it, is that you can affect change and move the city in the right direction personally to see what, how you make it better. And I think that goes back to Phil's thing is it might cost you, but you want to do it in a way that doesn't kill the poor 95-year-old that is paying, a crap ton of taxes on a house she's already paid for. Which I don't agree on the way the system is currently in the state or county. I don't like it, but at the same time, it pays for what we're doing for the city, so kind of have to roll with the punches on that one. But Anyway, sorry. Grandstanding.
I think it's a good question, Brian. I hope people would, answer it this way too, because we try to be real transparent. For instance, if you want to know why your water bills goes up, I can tell you why your water bill is going up. You may have some answers that say, well, we consider this to help it go down. Because, you know, the old statement, two heads are better than one. You may see something different that we haven't seen because we're closer to it, right? But when we talk about this, getting this group together, what was it, 3 years ago, maybe? Phil?
3 years ago, this is the third
Years
year.
ago, we want to be totally transparent, but we realize that we have an obligation to spend taxpayers' money in the most efficient and effective way. Now, I can tell you, and Phil gets mad when I say this, but he wasn't the only one sitting on the council at the time. I mean, we just spent, what was it, nearly $3 million for that water tank? Now we have to depreciate that, right? Because we know we're gonna need another water tank down the road. We've got at least two uncapped wells in this city. They're gonna have to be uncapped here at some point in time, which is not cheap to generate adequate water. You know, to your point, we could charge all the people down south more than for water if we wanted to, because we had to put that tank in to meet their needs in the south. We didn't have to put that tank in to meet the needs of the people anywhere else really in the city. But we had to put that tank in because we didn't have enough bottled water to fight a fire, for instance, if it came up. Because what happens is the city, particularly during the pandemic, grew so fast that we couldn't keep up with it. The other thing I would just ask this committee to think about is long-term too. Because a lot of the cost, and Dave will tell you this, is we had equipment that was on its last leg, right? Because no one would, I mean, there was this thing of we haven't increased property taxes for 17 years. At the same time, all of our equipment is getting older. Our park equipment was what, 25 years old, John, in many
The oldest
cases?
playground yet.
We
And
weren't depreciating anything.
we weren't depreciating any. That's another story, but I would just say that I hope you as a committee would look at this and say, okay, look, we have a fiduciary duty to make sure we're spending. We're not overcharging our residents. And that we're using the money in the most efficient and effective ways. And as John said, if we're doing something we shouldn't be doing, I've always said this. First thing we ought to do is ask ourselves the question, with the things we're doing, are we doing it in the best way? Second, are we doing things we shouldn't be doing? And if so, let's quit doing it. And third, what should we be doing that we're not? And, you know, there's a lot of gap to fill in there. But I think you'll find it's a little bit more complex than it looks like on the surface. But we want your input to say, hey, is there a better way to do this, or should we even be doing this? And I've always posed this question: do we want to be a city, or do we want to be a community? Because to be a community, there's things that we're gonna put out there that aren't gonna pay for themselves. For instance, you know, what should we do at the senior center? You know, that's costing us what, John, 70,000-80,000 a year?
A year.
We
With
could
no,
close that down. But then what do we do to all of our seniors who have helped build this community over the years? So those are the things I would hope you would look at and say, hey, got some great ideas. There's a more efficient way to do this. You know, we got a problem because we put a huge thing on our citizens here. You've heard me say 94% of our property tax comes from residential properties. Just down here, Harrisville is like 85%. So I hope you'll look at things long-term too, because if we look at things short-term, what happens, Phil? Eventually it catches up to us, right?
it bites you in the butt really hard.
And so those are just some
Really
of the
hard.
things from my perspective. But, you know, we had to increase the water bills. I mean, we're depreciating a $3 million tank now. And we gotta collect money to pay for the next tank, right?
Well, to add what you're saying, Mayor, one of the things that I've appreciated over the last nearly 12 years being involved is that as different individuals have sat on council, been on committees like this, and those extra sets of eyes, we've learned a whole lot of things. And the city has changed and how we do things. You know, I look at our risk status, what it used to be compared to what it is now, because we did a simple thing like changing who was doing our audits. And we got a different set of eyes that came in and said, wow, okay, what's this? Mayor, your expertise in accounting and those things has made a huge change. It's this continued growth process, and that's what's been good about this committee the last couple of years, has been the ideas that come, right? That we haven't found any magic bullets yet in this committee, but there's been a lot of discussion, a lot of new eyes, a lot of new ideas and new experiences to come in and say, okay, well, let's try throwing this at the wall and see if it sticks. And that's what's gotten the city to where it is now. A lot of improvements, a lot of efficiency gains over the last 6-7 years. Budget reductions, our budget would be, while with the efficiency gains, positions that we decided that didn't need to be refilled,
Probably 5.
500,000-600,000 a year, easy, that have been taken out of the budget because of conversations like this, which is what I think this committee can help do. And your experience is different than anybody's in here with the businesses that you run and those kinds of things. Your experience is different. My experience is different. And I think together we can look and try and keep marching that a little bit further forward, so that every year we're a little better, we're a little more efficient, we're a little more, we're less dependent on property taxes. We're better at getting, sales taxes, economic development, those kinds of things. I think that's something we need to do as a city, is to focus more on specific economic development.
Well, and it's interesting too. I think this is something we've probably never done in this committee, but we've got numerous contracts with outside folks. I think our group does a good job at negotiating those contracts. But one of the big ones we've got coming up is the garbage contract, right?
Yeah, it's coming up.
It's a major, because it's a pass through, right? So maybe we have some discussion about, what can we negotiate differently? I mean, we don't have a lot of control because nobody wants to bid on. But for instance, I was in a finance committee yesterday at their sewer report. They're issuing $100 million bond. I guess who's gonna pay for it? All the users, right? Because the Environmental Protection Agency is requiring all this upgrade in the plant. And so the discussion is how they're gonna pay for that. If they charge the cities in fees or property tax on people's bills. But we have numerous contracts out there. And I think the other thing too is, it doesn't hurt to look and say, is there a third party that can do something better than us? I don't think so, but maybe there is. Those are the things I think we need to kind of be looking at. Because it's just like the county, where we haul all of our garbage, right? They charge us a tonnage thing. Is there a way we can reduce that tonnage that we're sending to the landfill? I mean, those are some of the things that are major expenditures that are contractually kind of obligated to, that we sometimes don't have as much control, but maybe there are some things that somebody can look at the contract and say, hey, have you thought of this? You thought of that? Here's a maybe negotiating thing we can use to reduce the cost by us doing some things to do that. So there's nothing that's not open here in my mind. I mean, you can look at anything you want. But to me, if I was doing this, I'd start at the major things and, see if there's opportunities there, because sometimes you can get caught up in the weeds, but the big dollar sometimes, hanging right out there.
Yeah, and I think that was one of the reasons I started looking at other cities, is that, they farm out their treasurer to the same person they do the audit, so it's kind of like, didn't know you could do, little things like that kind of, maybe get your brain thinking in a different direction. So just stuff like that. And that's the only reason I passed that around is because I wondered. And so, again, everything's on the table. I think the biggest thing, the mayor was talking about the big ticket items. But this is also for the new guys is education, and I think that was the whole point of this thing is to get more people involved so they understand. And so it's almost like a slow octopus arms to go out to the community so that people understand, why certain things happen. Why you're getting charged for this, well, what the, because I have so many relatives that live in North Ogden, and who do they yell at? They don't call the city, they yell at me, and why, what the crap are you doing over there, So why isn't my pothole filled, and I'm, then I yell at Dave, nothing. Oh, okay, he's
John,
paying attention. So,
What's our
no.
debt on the city? You got 150 in assets. What's our debt? Is
So if you net it all, we're at like 136.
136 in debt?
No, sorry, that's our total, like if you net off the 18. I mean, sorry, I'm looking at the financials,
The only debt we have is on the police
I was
building.
gonna say, but do we
Yeah.
have any debt?
so it's close to 10.
10.
But the way that financial statements is, they take off about 18 from the 154 to drop us down to 136. So
And the audit's got more details on that, but the interest rate on that thing is ridiculous. So, I mean, good, ridiculous.
Yeah.
So, and
I
that
was just curious what our debt was. I knew the police station had a loan on, what anything else did.
yeah,
Our 9.5, we made two
Yeah.
principal payments now.
yeah, that's the only thing. Once the pool is paid off, that's the only debt we have is the police station, and it's 2 bonds.
And that's under 9 million.
Or yeah, that's true. I guess it's
Average
Been a couple
interest rate
years.
on one of the tranches is 1.99%. The other one's 3.7.
Yeah. good interest rates.
Right now, we're paying, on the certain tranches under 1%, we're paying like 90 basis points.
The money in the accounts, do we collect interest on those?
Mhm. Yeah, we have to house it with entities that the state tells us to. Most of our money's with the PTIF, which is the state account, Public Trust Investment Fund. And it ranges, a couple years ago, we were getting 0.5% a year, but lately it's 4 or 5. Yeah, so it kind of just ebbs and flows, but they're all very safe investments. And we have about $5 million worth of firm that helps us do a little more managed. But it hasn't been performing quite as good with as the PTIF. So it just is just fun.
Just curious.
Yeah. So and then anything for future agendas? I mean, the way this group has always worked is that they can suggest agenda items. If you send them to Chris, he's the one who builds the agenda still. So if you have ideas and you want to start with a topic, we can start. One good thing we might start with next time that we would bring as staff is the 5-year capital plan, just so that the group can kind of see, hey, this is part of the plan. So you can see like, hey, we need to replace water meters because we know they go bad after 10 years and they'll start going bad here in about 3 years, that kind of stuff. So.
Okay. I think we're close before we get into another round. So any other thoughts or comments, Mr. Anderson?
I'd like to answer your question.
Yeah, I'm gonna get your,
Oh,
I was intentionally looking away from you, going around the room. I didn't want to be pinned down, but I'm here because of dissatisfaction and hope.
dissatisfaction and what, and hope and what?
Dissatisfaction with the way things are from time to time and hope that they can be made better. That's why. Hope, and because I read what Mayor Berube wrote to us.
What do they say now?
Yeah, GPT.
There was no.
I think it was your getting involved message.
But Mr. Call, you mentioned as far as being a lot of opportunity that's going to actually make an impact to look at programs. And Mayor, you mentioned upcoming contracts that are coming up for renewal. There's being things that we might look at that could be like we call it, a lot of bang for the buck. You know, we can spend a lot of time talking about whether we buy Dixie cups or not, but that's a small potato. Can you like real quickly just list off some of these larger opportunities that you can think of? You mentioned the trash disposal. There's one. What are some others? Can I put you on the spot? Or do you want to think about it?
So if you look where we're paying the big money on third-party contracts, it's to the sewer out there, and if you, I have fought this the last 4 years, but if you saw how they were allocating the cost, nobody'd be happy, because it has basically nothing to do with usage. It has to do with the assessed value of the homes and the population.
And that's the sewer district?
Central Weaver Sewer District is a big one,
Its own entity though, right?
huh?
It's its own entity.
Yeah, but nobody shows up to their meetings
Who's in
either.
charge of that one? Is that, are they a government entity or they're private?
If they're a service,
The-
federal service district.
The board is most typically the mayors, so our mayor's on the board, and to his point, he's been fighting their fee structure. But it's 1 out of 9.
Okay, so real quick,
Okay.
Do we pay to get the sewer down to them and then they process it, but we're being charged on home values?
Assessed value of the homes and the population. Now, I've been fighting this for 5 years. What does that have to do anything with sewer flow? Because as Dave would tell you, we're spending a lot of money lining our pipes, because what happens is if your pipes are all crappy, water seeps into that, and then it goes out there, right?
Increases the flow.
Increases the flow, which
Worthless.
causes them to have to expand the,
But they're not charging by flow.
that's exactly right.
Okay, so if I may rein the question back in.
Yeah, so you got that, you've got trash contract,
Trash, sewer, next.
you've got, what's the other one? You got the trash contact for the hauler, and you got the trash contact with the county, the transfer station. And they base us on so much on
Tonnage.
tonnage,
Right.
so if
So
there's a way to reduce
there's a
the
fee to,
tonnage.
fee to pick it up and then a tipping fee.
Yeah, tipping fee.
Okay, so if we can just kind of, are there any other general categories? Trash, sewer, anything else? Not to lengthen the discussion on details, but any other areas we might think about?
So health insurance is a big expense.
Health insurance? Another one?
Salaries and health insurance are the big, salaries and benefits are the big number.
2 years ago, we were told to not touch salaries and benefits.
Well, I think you should understand how we determine the fair pay for our employees. I mean, maybe you have a better idea on how we can do that. But it's not like the old days, we're in a competition for employees, right?
Okay,
Our
so
rates pretty low.
salaries and benefits would be something else we could look at.
I don't have a problem with it.
Okay.
I
If
mean,
anything else pops up, speak
Yeah,
up, but I
those
want
are
to
the
pick
big-
John's, I'm sorry.
those are the big things. I mean,
Okay. John, you mentioned programs as being logical places to make a good size impact.
Well, so in the one we use, like aquatic center is a good example. If you just eliminated the aquatic center, then that's a $90,000 saving, potentially.
Versus the
But so,
community feel, do we have?
but
Okay,
to your point, like if you try and decide if the aquatic center should buy Dixie cups or Solo cups, like the difference there is not gonna be a big deal. So that's what I'm kind of say is if the city can hone in on what its main goals are and start eliminating programs that aren't part of that goal, then that's where you're gonna find big savings. Cause when you, let's say, I think we need a planning department, but if you just took the planning department and said, we are not gonna fund the planning department anymore, then, that's $300,000. So,
Okay, so is there a list of these programs that we might think about?
if you look at the budget, every single department is kind of a program. That's a good way to think of
Please
it.
don't eliminate city council. That would be, so
The state requires us, although we don't have to pay them. Just kidding.
you only get
As I
$500.
understand, you don't get paid very much
We're not getting paid anyway.
per hour. so-
I think
yeah,
we're below minimum wage at this point right now.
yeah, the council puts in a lot of time for their
you know,
$500
some
a month.
cities outsource the inspection.
Inspections?
Now, that's probably in smaller floor
Planning and
growing,
all that.
well, but we have a building inspector department that reviews plans and stuff, and I mean, if you wanna look at it, I'm not suggesting that, I'm just saying, if you wanna look at everything, there's options.
Yeah.
Whether they're good options or not, right?
Yeah, Pleasant View outsources their inspection services, for example.
Just thinking the 80-20 rule, it says, you know,
Well, those,
focus on things with a high likelihood of maybe making some difference.
you know,
Okay, thank
as you know, we had a big discussion a number of years ago, should the sheriffs come out here, should we have our own police department or not?
I got yelled at first time, remember? Don't you remember that one? First time we had this.
Now, the sheriff showed huge savings. But even a dumb guy like me can say, if they're paying 145,000 FTE. And we're paying 137,000 FTE, the only way he can save money is to have less officers on the street, which increases response time. And doesn't meet the expectations of our citizens in policing.
The savings on the bill, then wasn't so much on the.
No, the building had nothing to do with that.
No.
Not in his analysis. His
When
was,
I talked to him, that's what he said to me,
well,
because the building was part of the discussion, because the building hadn't been built yet.
well, if you look at his whole thing was to take, less people on the street.
But you
Less
just,
people on the street.
you can take that, but you can take just anecdotal data from what's currently out there in Weaver County. It's 7 minutes and it's close to 2 or less here. So, I mean, it's,
7 minutes is good right now.
what's that?
Weaver County is not as.
But I think what Chris is trying to say is that what we pay for, I mean, when you're talking heart attack, the officers show up before the ambulance does and they start doing compressions. That's what this is, right? And so it makes
Oh,
a
I thought
difference.
that would beat them into
But that's
submission.
the policy question this council made a couple of years ago, is we'd rather spend a little more to know that we have more control over the service.
Do we have, well, I think part of the conversation is in all of these conversations, whether it's Parks and Recs, the police department, fire department, sewer, whatever, there are intangibles that are not data driven and that will never be quantified, that play a part in, I mean, you can look at the research that's done on the importance of youth delinquency and suicide rates and parks. Right? The more parks and places you have, the lower the suicide rate, the lower the delinquency. Is that worth funding? You can't put a data point on it. I know you smirk at it because you're a data guy. But when you're the council making those decisions, you have to take those things into account. And there's a lot of the intangible. And so that's all part of the discussion. But it will have over lunch.
Don't let it stifle anything. I think that's the key thing.
No.
Don't, I think that it doesn't necessarily have to, you don't have to think what's the council gonna think? No, just whatever comes out of your brain and goes out on a piece of paper, we discuss, and when it comes to voting, I'm not gonna vote, but you guys get to vote and figure out what's gonna go into, the final, word to the council. So anyway, we're past 5, so.
We got a
we're
couple of
ramping.
raised.
What?
I don't know if you want to let her speak or not, but.
Oh, sure. Especially those 2 ladies, we can't say no to them, can we? I'm not gonna.
Just so there's no comments about hair.
No, she hasn't done that in a while.
Oh, do you
Go ahead,
still,
Susan.
hi, Phil, you still got
Hey.
some?
Oh,
Okay, hi. Okay, this is Susan Kilborn. Y'all know I'm a resident. I just have a couple questions as points of clarification for me. And if I missed it, my bad. My first question is, do you have a chairperson? My second
Me.
question is, will you be having someone take sketchy notes at best? My third question is, will the public be able to see them? My fourth question is, I know rapid fire, I'm trying to stay under minutes that I'm trained to do. My fourth question is, I see our friend Mr. Anderson there sitting at the table. Is he a member of this subcommittee or is he an interested resident like myself? And the last one is, I see Dave sitting back there. Is Dave a member of the subcommittee or an interested public works director?
Okay,
Got-
so is that it?
Yeah, that's it.
So they decided to keep me as chair. That could change. Sketchy notes, yes. Will they be distributed to the public right now? We haven't really decided. In the past, the answer was no. But if you'd like, I can email them to you. There's nothing, they will be sketchy because I'm gonna write them. But Doug is not a member. He's part of the public, and Dave is a staff member at this point. Did I get them all? Yes?
You are on point.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
All right. On to Miss Steph, I think is.
All
Go ahead.
right,
Oh, it moved on me.
Oh, hold
All right.
on. Go.
okay, now can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now? All right, Steph
can.
Casey. Currently a resident. Yes, I'm moving, but I'm still interested and as involved as I can be. As someone who was on this committee last year, today's meeting was honestly a little bit chaotic. I would like to say that as someone who's listening from the outside and trying to understand the discussion, it was, I'm curious to know if you guys, what your goals are. What is the purpose? Have you guys decided that? I would love to see some order. It was really hard to follow what was happening. There was a lot of feelings and things that people didn't like, but there was no real, I don't know. And I'm not trying to, poo-poo. I just would like to see this be productive and that I understand what you guys are discussing, what you're going to do, what your goals are, what I'm going to, if I'm interested in tuning in again. I also have to say, I was going to ask about Doug as well. I think he should just be a committee member, especially since he just,
Doug.
well, then he should probably not be sitting at the table speaking when he feels so inclined to. Or can I just raise my hand and comment within this committee whenever I feel like it as well? It was really hard to follow. There was some new ideas coming through, some new perspectives, which I'm excited to hear. But I'd like to hear more than just, I have problems with these, should we do this? So I'm just hoping that maybe there can be some plan, or I understand what you guys are gonna, are hoping to complete as this committee, what your goals are. That would be great. But anyway, I would love to be there. I'm sad I didn't volunteer. I also am realizing that I didn't volunteer, so I'm not trying to, it was
There's still
really hard
time.
to, yeah, I'm moving, so I'm not going to be in the city too much longer.
That
And
doesn't
that's,
matter. Well,
but
well,
regardless,
I
as
agree
someone
with-
watching, it was very difficult to follow and understand what was being discussed. So that's it. But I'm excited to hear what you guys come up with. Thanks.
Okay, and just to address a little bit, first meeting, mostly training. And we got done with training fairly quickly, but at the same time, if you remember our first meeting, it was pretty crazy. And agree, it's hard to listen and or watch when something is raw and there's not much on the agenda. Next time, we'll have more specific topics to review. And I think that's the key thing as part of this is the goal, is what you were talking about, is looking at the big things. And I think we'll start talking about what big things. At this point, we're good, the review of the audit and the previous year's budget, I think is crucial to come up with just beyond the certain things that were kind of thrown out here today. The goal is to educate, and it's also to help the city council, honestly, to get a different perspective on things. So, and honestly, I think some of the new folks are gonna help tremendously, I think. I'm excited. It was chaotic. I'm not gonna lie about that, but at the same time, a lot of rapid fire things came out. And if you look at my scattered sheet of paper here, it's gonna reflect that, so. But, anyways, that's it. We're way, well, not way over time, but anything else that people wanna know, we're here.
So is your next meeting, the 26th, being the
We're gonna,
Wednesday? Well,
I put it on the 12th.
yeah, I put it on the
That'll be on
12th,
the-
March 12th.
Not-
Yeah.
26th.
they're still on second, fourth Wednesday,
Yes.
Yeah,
but not this fourth Wednesday.
correct. Yeah, there's not enough time to get stuff done and I won't.
He's broke.
Bill and
Um,
I'll try to go to lunch before the next meeting so we can.
I already sent you a text.
We'll try and get some of our philosophical differences out so we don't have to air them
There-
here.
the first three meetings and on the first year, Steph, I don't think you were part of the, can I air?
Go for it.
Okay,
Sure.
there was, and Brenda will remember this too, there was such elevated comments and that was nothing, by the way. There was much more.
Improve, Phil.
Yeah, you have to work on that. So it definitely,
Yeah, I'm getting older.
So,
I thought it went pretty well. So.
I didn't actually tell anyone to shut up, did I? I mean, I was,
I don't remember.
was I more sick?
We'll have to go
the
watch
Okay.
tape. We'll watch tape and go find out. Anyway. That's part of, no, just kidding. Okay. I appreciate it and we're gonna hit the gavel. I don't have a gavel. I'll have to get a gavel.